I'm Shannon Amos.
And I'm Daisy Kimbro.
And we are expats
living in
Medellin, Colombia. We're really excited to share our journey about why we left the U.S. Daisy, when did you leave the U.S.?
I left the U.S. in 2023. I wanted a better quality of life. Where I moved to was Playa del Carmen, Mexico.
Okay, and I left the U.S. in 2016, and I have lived in several countries. I've traveled to over 52 now. I've lived in Bali, I've lived in Thailand, in Mexico, and now I'm currently in Colombia, in Medellin, Colombia. We connected in Playa.
Yes.
Yeah, and we met in Playa, it was about a year ago now, right?
Yeah.
We decided to travel this time to Colombia as friends. It was a way to kind of cut our overhead, but also to navigate together. Because I'm pretty experienced, but this is pretty new for you, right?
Very new, yes.
Okay. So what made you leave the U.S.?
Skyrocketing prices of housing, the horrible food that's there, and just a better quality of life.
Yeah. And I think for myself, I left in 2016 when my mom passed, and I took a year sabbatical and backpacked solo across Southeast Asia. And it was such an incredible experience for me that I wanted to not only stay outside of the country, because when I returned, I really struggled with what they call repatriating. And it was coming back into the US after living abroad. It was just like, for me, it was kind of a mind blower, and I just wasn't feeling it anymore. So the consumerism, the cost of everything, inflation, but also racism and all these other things. And it's not that racism doesn't exist in other countries, because it does, but I feel like I wanted to be where I was welcomed and celebrated and not just tolerated.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And in that process, I don't know, did you discover it as well? But I discovered, like, I actually started really healing when I left the US.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because living in Mexico, my first experience living abroad, I just felt safer than in the US. Met so many wonderful people, the connections.
Absolutely.
And the food, the good food, the juices, the coconut water.
Yeah.
The
sun.
And the beaches.
Yes, absolutely.
And what's so amazing is, for me, eating the food in Mexico, I actually lost weight.
Yeah.
And a lot of people experience that because the food is not toxic, doesn't have the chemicals that it has in the US. So it's just been a great experience for me.
Yeah, I think the same. I noticed that when I travel, it's almost like you can eat more and still not gain the weight. And I know part of that, it's a couple of aspects to that. Part of it is that we're walking. We tend to live and choose neighborhoods that are walkable. And when I first moved to Playa, I walked a lot, and then I eventually got a car, but I really walked everywhere, and I was getting in way more steps. I was being more active. I'm riding my bike around town, and that pretty much transferred into all the countries that I lived in, because clearly I'm not buying a car in every country that I would live in for a while, or when I was slow traveling. So the food, not having all the GMOs. I mean, a lot of our foods aren't even allowed in certain countries. And while there is a propensity to go back to some of those things that we're used to because you miss them, you miss things from home, you're getting a lot of farm fresh food, and it makes a big difference. But I also feel like part of the healing experience for us as women of color, as Black women, is the subtle things like the microaggressions, like not being followed in stores, having people just be very friendly and very kind and
so kind,
treating you like a queen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I experienced that in Thailand. I experienced it in Mexico, where people are just very warm and friendly. I've experienced it in other countries too. Where have you been so far, and where have you lived so far?
My first experience living abroad was Mexico, Playa del Carmen, Mexico. I mean, I've traveled to other countries, and now we're in Colombia. And this is a different experience from Mexico. But I love it here. It is so amazingly beautiful. Nature everywhere. We have a little stream running alongside of our condo that's tranquil, and just bamboo trees and the plants. It's like a forest almost.
And it's funny because both of us have always lived alone. Aside from me having a partner, always lived and traveled solo. So I've been traveling solo for years. And when we met up, we had such a great connection as friends. Like she's like a sister to me. It's the first time I've ever really traveled with someone that was so easy. So we decided to do that, for a period of time in Colombia. We're currently in El Poblado in Medellin. It is beautiful and amazing. Very few people here speak English. Learning the local language definitely helps break the barriers, and I feel like you get treated so much nicer if you just make the effort. Some of the things to think about though when you're thinking about moving abroad is how long you can stay there. For example, we can be here for 90 days.
Yeah.
But in Mexico and the state of Quintana Roo in particular, you can be in the state for 160 days on a tourist visa. So that's something to think about when you're traveling abroad. And if you're thinking about moving abroad, you want to check the local visa policies. Because we were even thinking, oh, let's extend in Colombia. And then we realized, oh, we got to go. We've been here for a few months already. It's time for us to go.
Yeah.
So in Mexico, you can apply for temporary residency. It is a process. You have to hire an attorney, but you can get temporary residency that can put you on a path to full residency. And there's a fee involved for that. And that applies to many countries. Even in the UK, you can apply for a residency, but it's a process and you have to check and see how much money it is. On a tourist visa in some countries like Bali and Thailand only allow you 30 days. When I was living in Bali, I was able to buy an extension for, I think it was 60 days, and then I had to leave the country and come back. So we would do what's called visa runs, where you go to another country for a little while, neighboring country like Thailand or Cambodia or Vietnam or Malaysia, stay for a week or so, and then come back. But you have to be mindful because a lot of countries are tightening up on these visa runs, and it is just better to purchase or pay for your extension up front so that you can stay longer. And if your intention is to stay for a really long time or permanently, then you want to adhere to the local laws so you don't end up getting fined.
Yes.
What other things have you experienced, or what has really been attractive for you since you left the country?
I would say what stands out the most to me is the food, the quality of food, even the atmosphere, the vibe of living abroad. It's just a different vibe from the US. You feel more relaxed, you feel more welcome.
Yeah.
The people in Mexico, even here in Colombia, they are so kind, so welcoming. They're willing to help you.
Yeah, they do.
Even if you can't, as long as you try to speak the language, even if you can't, if you make mistakes, they will help you.
I find that too. I find people to be very helpful. I also think it's important when we move to these countries to be mindful that we could be gentrifying a neighborhood. When a lot of Americans, Canadians, or Europeans come to a country like Mexico or anywhere for that matter, we literally raise the rental prices. And I see a lot of times in Facebook groups, people will say, oh, I have a budget of $2,500 or $3,500. Like, you are blowing the rent up just by making those kind of comments or saying, oh, it's so cheap here, compared to where you came from. Those type of things and behaviors can actually drive the prices up and force the locals out. And so I think it's really important to be mindful and to also give back to the local communities in any way that you can, through volunteerism, through helping to educate people by paying fair wages. Speaking of wages, I know one of the biggest questions that comes up is people want to know, how do you make a living if you're living abroad, right? Now, you were semi-retired when I met you, and yet you had a business in the U.S., or you have a business in the U.S.
I have a business in the U.S., yes. But I turned that business over to my daughter, and she's running the business. I came here so I can concentrate and work on my books I'm writing. So far I've written 2 books. I have 2 more to go, and I'm almost finished with those. but also we have collaborated and we are starting a business together.
Yeah, yeah, we're really excited about that. And so, for people who are out there who are thinking about leaving the US, a couple of things I would recommend. If you're a homeowner, you can rent out your home and hopefully make a little bit of income or a great amount of income from your real estate investment or from any properties you own in the US. I didn't own a home when I left the US. I actually was sold one. And that's another method. If you decide you want to sell your home, I was able to sell a home for a profit. And that enabled me to move in a very comfortable way. It enabled me to begin a new business. And for me, because I was on my healing wellness journey and I wanted other people to experience that, I ended up creating an online business, which is a wellness company and a wellness travel company. So I create retreats and I also now have a product line coming out. But when Daisy and I met, we talked a lot about our vision and our dreams and our goals. And now we're collaborating on an online business together that we're really excited about. And we'll share more in the future. But if you're thinking about moving out of the country, it's really important to create something for yourself, an online business or possibly monetizing something like this, like a YouTube channel.
Or working remotely.
Yes.
A lot of people, a lot of friends that I know, that's what they do. They work remotely so they can work anywhere, any country, and all you have to have is a laptop.
And I would recommend this if you can get an online job that will allow you to live outside of the country prior to leaving, then that's great as well. Or if you have an online business that you can run. I even have friends who run businesses in the US who go back and forth, and that's a part of their lifestyle. And they tend to live closer to the US in places like Costa Rica or Colombia or Mexico because they can jump right back into the States, handle their business, and come back. So there's multiple ways that you can do this. Some people leave when they're retired, but I'm one of those people that just says, why wait until you're fully retired? Why not get out here while you're still young enough to really enjoy?
Enjoy.
Yeah, because I find myself sometimes traveling and I'm in my 50s and I'm very active, and so I'm able to climb volcanoes and get in and out of boats and canoes and all the things, go trekking and backpacking and whitewater rafting, all the things I've done. But if you wait until you get to a certain point in your life and there's going to be things that you can't do, then you don't get to have those experiences. So I'm like, why not do it now? Why wait? Right?
Yes.
Now, the flip side of that is leaving your friends, your family, your community in the US. That to me is probably the hardest part.
That is the hardest part because for me, I have my children, I have my grandkids, and I miss them so much. Yeah, you can always go back and visit, or they can come and visit you, but still, it's like you're leaving a part of you behind in the US.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it hard.
Yeah, I think the same. I have a daughter in the US and I have family in the US and a community of amazing friends that are my family. And missing weddings, missing birthday parties and certain holidays, sometimes that's really challenging for me. Beautiful thing is that I've decided to be in Mexico because it puts me in close proximity to the US. And I've had loads of friends come visit me. We recently had friends come from Los Angeles that visited with us here in Medellin, and that was amazing. But we miss our families. And so you want to make sure that you build into your budget, the resources and the finances to be able to go back and forth when you want. And I think that's something to think about if you are deeply connected to your family and your community. But if you're not and you're okay being away, or you have the kind of family members that will come or friends that will come across the planet for you, that's beautiful too. I didn't want to put that burden on some of my family members. I didn't want to put that on my daughter. So I feel like being closer allows me, I can jump on a 2 or 3 hour flight and see her and then come back and she can do the same. So it works.
Yeah, you can make it work.
Absolutely. And then we also have created friendships around the world.
Yes.
We've connected with people, and sometimes Americans, Canadians, Europeans, but also people from all around the world. I know in my experience, having lived in so many different countries, I have like a little family in almost every country I've been in so far. And I've made friends. And, you know, it's funny because some of the things that separate us in the US, like age, don't seem to be a real thing in other countries. I've met people as young as 18, 19 to 70 and 80 and created friendships with them. Ageism, the colorism,
Right.
all of those things haven't been barriers in some of the relationships that I've made. And I love that.
Yeah, well, I'm new to this, so I haven't, I've made some connections. And like you said, the age, all different ethnicities,
Yeah.
and it's just a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to connect with people who travel the world
Yeah.
and share their experiences with you, and makes it just so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, and I think one last thing before we wrap up today is that really making an effort to connect with the local culture, making an effort to try to speak the language, also making an effort to connect with locals and make friends with locals, because they can also support you, guide you, teach you,
Yes.
and then it can be mutual because you can support them, guide them, teach them. One of the challenges I first had in Mexico is I started feeling like a lot of the relationships I had were talked about this transactional. Yeah, in the beginning it felt that way. I felt like, oh, these people that are around me, I'm either having to pay for something. And now that I'm speaking the language better and speaking better Spanish, I'm finding that my relationships are more authentic and not just transactional. That is really refreshing.
Yes.
Yeah, I have like a little family in Bali, a little family in Thailand, a little family in Mexico.
I look forward to that experience because I don't have that yet.
Yeah, but you're new.
That's a beautiful thing.
And you will. You
Yeah.
absolutely will. We want to encourage you, if you have been thinking about leaving the US, if it's because of the political climate, if it's because of the economical climate, or for whatever reasons, look at this as an opportunity to create something new for yourself and an opportunity to expand your world. It really has changed me. It's changed you.
Definitely has changed me.
Yeah.
For the better.
Absolutely. And it changes your perspective on the world, and you start to see, you know, how every little thing that we do, you know, really vibrates out into the world. So I just want to encourage you, and I hope that you'll subscribe. We'll be back with more content. This is our first video.
Our very first.
Yeah.
Yes.
So please subscribe. We'll be back, and I'm sure we'll get better in time. But if you have any questions about moving out of the country, about visas, about housing, living expenses, food, we're going to get more into that as we grow. Thank you so much for watching.
And if you like our content, please subscribe below.
And continue to follow our journey. We hope to see you soon.